We've just arrived at the American Swedish Institute, or ASI for short, located inside the Nelson Cultural Center. This Nordic-inspired museum also serves as a cultural education center filled with programs and classes. Every year they hold several events, which includes handcrafting, cooking classes, and even arts and culture, so this is great for youth and families. In addition to being a museum, this is also connected to the historic Turnblad Mansion, which I will feature here later in the video. Walk-ins or advanced tickets are welcome for the museum and the mansion, but no admission is needed for their store and their cafe. Many of the items featured here are historical artifacts or items made by local Nordic artisans. The museum is open from Tuesdays through Sundays, closed Mondays. Thursday nights are free from 3 to 8 p.m. All the items here, we found that there was a practicality to them. Everything was made out of wood or metals, and the tools to make them seemed a little primitive, but it all really served a purpose. It just further shows the skill and craftsmanship that these artisans needed to be able to work with these tools. Real quickly, I wanted to mention that the museum is accessible, so it's wheelchair friendly. There are ramps and there are elevators as well, so it makes it convenient for all people of all ages. Right now, a whole group of us is walking through a long corridor that connects the museum to the Turnblad Mansion. The Turnblad Mansion, aka the castle, was established in 1908 and belonged to the Turnblad family. The family worked with a couple Minneapolis architects to build on a street once called the Golden Mile. The mansion is built in a French Renaissance style with turrets, gargoyles, and lion details throughout. It features 33 rooms, each unique with details highlighting Swedish culture. Touring of the mansion is somewhat lax, where you can either join a group led by a tour guide / historian where they tell you details about each room and the history of the mansion, or you can free roam the mansion yourselves. The Turnblad's intention of building this home was so that it would last 100 years. You can tell in the craftsmanship and the quality of materials that went into the home. With all the woodwork, the ceiling detail, everything about this place was grand. One thing I thought that was interesting is the Turnblad family only lived here a short time, and the mansion was never fully furnished. Preserving this historic place is ongoing. The mansion was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1971 and then to the Heritage Preservation by the City of Minneapolis in 1974. This was my favorite room in the whole mansion, only because it's a place where I could get some me time and curl up with a good book, and just seeing the outside with the floor to ceiling windows is just heaven to me. If I had a mansion, this is definitely something I would incorporate. Above the conservatory is their famed Visby window. It's a colorful stained glass 9x14 window that was an original feature to the home. Throughout many of the rooms, you'll find a bunch of modern art like this one, another subtle way where they would mix old and new. Sometimes you'll even find videos like this one where they show how they make the item featured. Heading up to the third floor, you can see a little restroom here at the top of the landing. And I noticed that these stairs were on the narrow and small side. It's obviously not to code for today's standards, but it makes me wonder how short and tiny people were back in the day. So if I remember right, this room, aka the ballroom, was a place where they would hold parties and dances and performances. And I thought this is a really cool room to have in the house. Out here is kind of like their sitting area or waiting room, like if you wanted to rest your feet, which I thought was also a nice added touch. And looking out through these windows, you can see across the way the Nelson Cultural Center where we were in the beginning of the video. The kitchen, to me, was a little on the smaller side. Probably not in the past. It was probably a normal sized or even a big kitchen. This room was more or less reserved for the help. The details that you see here, the sinks, the stovetop, flooring, the marble details are original to the kitchen, I believe. I'm not sure which room that is that my husband is looking into, but here, this pass-through that you see here is where they pass dishes, or dishware, utensils, whatever it is that they needed to serve the family and their guests. But you can see here the scale of the pantry. It's huge. So I don't think anybody these days has a pantry this big. I'm not really sure, but you can store so many things in here, and I'm sure they needed ladders to get to the very top, which I didn't see here, but that's probably what they had in the past. And then coming around here, we're back to the grand foyer that I brought you to in the beginning of the video. This I thought was a really cool room to have in the house. I mean, I'm sure people that are rich have this type of room, the music room in their homes, if, you know, they were musically inclined. This is something I would definitely have in my space if I were to have a mansion. I would practice singing in here. My daughter and my sons could play piano in here. You could even have like a dance studio in here if you wanted. A fun tidbit I learned, the masonry, the stonework used here to build the whole mansion has some limestone and fossils, I believe, in it, which I thought was interesting. And it kind of just added to the uniqueness of the mansion. It was something that was new to me. I'd never heard of that before, but I thought it was great. This is the Fika Cafe, their Nordic-inspired cafe with a seasonal menu. Walk-ins are welcome, and it's on a first-come, first-served basis. So they're open 10 to 4 most days except for Mondays. Thursday is open until 8 p.m. That's also their happy hour from 3 to 8 with specials on alcohol. They have Nordic table classes, which includes cooking classes, workshops, or demos. They're held virtually or even in person. During the warmer months, you're able to dine outdoors and admire the mansion's courtyard gardens. Like the cafe, the store is open to the public. You don't need tickets to get in here. The museum store carries Nordic items as well as Nordic-inspired products. And if you're an ASI member, you can receive a shopping discount. I believe it's 10%. I imagine that there will be some of you that think the items in here are super expensive, but I assure you, most that I've seen in here are handmade. They're great quality, good items, and whoever you give them to, whether it's for yourself or somebody else, you won't be disappointed. I think it'll last you a while, and I think it's well worth the money.